in reality, there is no technology, not even a line of technology, not even a thought on how you could do that. So far, our only ability to deal with radiation is either monumentally powerful magnetic fields or just putting a bunch of mass between you and it. So that was just sort of hand-waved away.
Yeah.
The other projection forward of science, so everything else is science that actually exists or is like a more advanced version of existing principles.
Yeah.
It's Hermes' engines. So the Hermes is the ship that they take to get to and from Mars, and it's propelled by what's called a Casimir drive. It's an ion engine. So it's basically, it uses a bunch of energy to get particles sped up and spit them out the back of the ship, which gives you propulsion. And the particles are going so fast that they actually gain mass due to relativity. So that gives you even better thrust. That exists, like they have made those. But nothing resembling the scale of what Hermes has. Hermes is like thousands of times more powerful than the engines that they've made. But I accounted for how much energy it would take. That's why Hermes has to have a reactor and so on.
Yeah. Well, and is all that oxygen technology that's in, you know...
The oxygenator?
Yeah, is the oxygenator, that's all set like that?
The oxygenator, not only does it really exist, but there is a version of it that's being sent along with the next Mars rover. Mars 2020, it doesn't have a cool name like Curiosity yet, but it's called Mars 2020. It's very similar to the Curiosity. It's basically the exact same design as Curiosity, but with a different scientific payload on it. And one of the science instruments they have on there is called MOXIE. That's the name of the experiment. And it does exactly what the oxygenator does in the Martian. It gathers carbon dioxide from the air and then uses energy to strip the carbons off and then release pure oxygen just to prove that they can.
Just to do it, yeah.
No, well, just to prove they can. That's going to be,
yeah.
You're going to go to Mars. It's much easier to get the oxygen from the air than it is to bring it with you.
Yeah, so you're discussing the radiation, and I haven't read enough detail to know this, but I heard that radiation is a key problem, and a lot of people are like, well, maybe the first person that goes there may, you know, die of radiation poisoning or have some other kind of cancer or something from that, or I don't know.
It's not that bad. In fact, NASA recently said, like, if you were to spend a year or a year and a half or whatever, one full cycle, which is just over 2 years, I won't go into the details, but that's about how long a Mars mission would take. If you spent that much time doing it, your radiation dosage would be acceptable.
Okay.
That's what they decided.
To them.
Yeah. Well, it would be more than you would get on Earth, but it's not like you will now die of cancer. It's like you have a higher cancer risk. What's interesting is some it's funny to watch all the stuff that like real scientists have done with the Martian. Some people did a detailed analysis and worked out how much radiation all the members of the Ares 3 crew would have gotten.
Yeah.
And actually, Mark gets the least amount, unlike the rest of them, because Mark has, at any given time, a planet between him and half of the universe. So, like Mars itself blocks, cosmic galactic cosmic rays from half of the universe, whereas the rest of the crew, when they're out in Hermes, are getting it from all directions. And they also, so they turned it into, what are your odds of getting cancer earlier than you would have normally, right? And it worked out to be the worst. It's funny. First off, the younger you are, the worse off you are, because since you have such a longer lifespan ahead of you, your odds of getting cancer earlier increase because you have more. If you send like a 75-year-old person up into space,
right. Yep.
Their odds of getting cancer before they die of something else are slim. But if you send a 20-year-old up into space, it's higher. And for reasons that nobody understands, women are more susceptible to cancer from radiation than men are. People don't understand why, but it is. And so actually the worst off would be Johansson. Of the crew of Ares 3, Johansson, played by Kate Mara in the movie, she would be the most likely to end up with cancer because she's the youngest and she's female and she was on Hermes and not on Mars and so on. And her risk is about 5%, they calculated. She has a 5% chance of getting cancer earlier than she naturally would have.
I see. Okay.
So that's really, that kind of gives you a feeling of like, there's definitely an increased cancer risk. It's not something that would be deemed acceptable for, you know, like, if that was your cancer risk for like commercial air travel, that would be unacceptable. Right?
Flying would go, you know, yeah.
But for astronauts, yeah, it's okay. Most of the Apollo astronauts ended up with radiation-related problems also.
Okay.
One of the first problems you get from radiation, again, radiation is such a weird, mysterious box that we understand very little about its effects on the human body. But one of the things you get, if you get a high-ish dose of radiation, but not like some super fatal dose, you will very likely get cataracts later in life. Why cataracts? I don't know, but your eyes are real sensitive to it. And all of the Apollo astronauts, all of the original Apollo astronauts got cataracts. So, and a lot of them got cancer, you know, but you know, treatable cancers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Environmental things, you probably could just take it down to radiation from space travel. There's a lot of mitigating factors there. So can you tell us about this with the movie of Martian? How did you feel about the film and how well did you think it translated? Just tell us about that.
Oh, I'm thrilled with the movie. I think they did a fantastic job. I mean, it really follows the book very well, and Matt Damon completely nailed the personality of Watney that I had in mind. And so I just think they did fantastic. You couldn't ask for more as a novelist. You just, it's a dream come true.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was spot on too, but some people go, oh, why did they do that? So,
there's always going to be differences. They had to cut stuff from the book, of course, otherwise it'd be a 6-hour movie. I mean,
right. It's a long, yeah, he's there for a while. Yeah. So I also heard, maybe I'm wrong, is the Artemis, the rights have already been picked up for film?
So Fox has bought the film rights for Artemis, not just optioned, but bought, which means a little bit more commitment on their part. But you never know. I mean, they could easily just leave it in development hell forever. But you know, fingers crossed.
Yeah, for sure. So what, can you give us an idea of what's coming in the future? Are you thinking about revisiting any of these characters, like say Jazz or other characters,
yeah.
or what are you doing now?
Well, I'd like to write sequels to Artemis. Even the people who didn't like the book said that the setting was awesome. Like, well, even like the negative reviews are like, here's why Andy Weir's Artemis sucks. And it goes through like everything they hate about me, and they're like, but the setting was really cool. You know, so like, I think I'm on to something with the setting.
Yeah, right. Cool. Well, what have I hit on that you might want to talk about? Because I'm getting ready to flip it over.
Well, there is one scientific question that has always baffled me. Donald Duck just wears a shirt. Right?
Yes.
Well, wait, hear me out.
Okay.
He just wears a shirt.
Yeah.
But when he comes out of the shower, he puts a towel around his waist.
That's a tough one.
What constitutes naked for Donald Duck?
He doesn't care, it just rolls off his back.
This vexes me.
Did you hear me? He doesn't care, it just rolls off his back.
Let's stand in the corner and think about what you do.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of corners in this room. I've been busy.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to shoot some questions, so if you would like to ask Andy Weir a question, why don't you go ahead and raise your hand, I'll bring it on over. Yes, sir.
Okay, my name is Robert Hotchkiss. I realize the theme is on Mars in your book, but I'd like to ask a question about space travel in general. I watched some movies, Passengers by Jennifer Lawrence, and Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And Passengers with Jennifer Lawrence, passengers agree to be colonists on the planet Homestead 2, but here's the thing. By the time you get to Homestead 2, centuries, at least 1 century, maybe 2 will pass. And in Planet of the Apes, the astronaut, Colonel Taylor, time travels, and he thinks he's on an alien planet, but he's actually on Mars, and Escape from the Planet of the Apes. three scientists flying that same shuttle, and they travel.
So hang on a second. We got probably a lot of people to ask questions. So if you could.
Okay, my point is that the one thing that remains constant is that one theory is that any form of space travel will involve some form of time travel as well, either forwards or backwards. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's not a theory. There is time dilation. If you're going relativistic speeds, if you get up near the speed of light, you experience time slower than, say, the planet Earth does. So if you went to Alpha Centauri at nearly the speed of light, on Earth, people would experience 4 years between the time of when you left and when you arrived at Alpha Centauri, because it's 4 light years away. But you would experience much, much less than 4 years of time. Now, what you're also talking about in those movies is cryogenic storage, like some means of keeping a human alive in stasis for, you know, months, years, centuries, whatever. That's a technology that we have not advanced on well at all. So it turns out entropy is really, really difficult to deal with. But
we
yeah,
can see your hand. We can see your hand. All right, right over here.
Thanks. Hi. I've read both Martian several times actually because I love it, and I read the Artemis book and I love it. So speaking as a girl, it's awesome. Although if you want to do a sequel about Rudy, the hot Mountie, I'd be with that. Just to let you know.
I absolutely, he's my. I do want to do a sequel with Rudy. Actually, yeah.
So I'm going to spoiler alert, everybody. Just a slight spoiler alert. As a female reader, one of the things that I'm most interested in that story as I'm reading it was the possible romantic entanglements of jazz, which I realize is not necessarily something that a white male writer is always most interested in. But I know you snuck it a little bit.
I don't think white makes me unromantic.
You were just making the comment earlier about how she was so different from you. I was just making a joke. I apologize. But, I just wanted you to speak to that element, you know, without giving any spoilers away. But was that it's not really. There's a tiny element in The Martian. There's a tiny element in Artemis, and I wanted you to speak to writing that piece and how you find writing romance, even though you're marketing.
I have a love-hate relationship with romance plots. I mean, I like watching them sometimes. I hate writing them, and but also it really drives me crazy when a movie, if a movie is not about interpersonal relationships, romantic side plots to me are just a distraction. And you would never want to watch a movie with me on Netflix or anything like that, because I will literally I will zero in on characters that I'm like, this character is a pointless romantic subplot, and he or she has no effect on the plot that I care about. So I will literally fast forward through every scene they're in. So I didn't put romantic subplot. I put cute. It's cute. Like in The Martian, the stuff with Beck and Johansson was cute, and it didn't take up a lot of time. In Artemis, there is a little bit of romantic tension here and there with Jazz and a guy, but it's not a big deal, right? And I just don't like it when it seems grafted. It's like, unless, how do I put it? Unless the romance or the romantic subplot is in some way germane to the plot, why, I don't want to spend time on it, because other than that, because if you're not advancing the plot, what are you doing? You're just wasting the reader's time. And I am an extremely impatient reader, so I write extremely impatient narratives.
Okay, just off of that, I just kind of noticed too, but for her, it's not just about the romance, I don't think. It's how she kind of makes a mess out of all of her relationships, and it's just kind of one more regret that she has that's pulling her back or holding her down, or, you know, making her feel bad, you know.
Jazz is not great at maintaining personal relationships at all, and like friendships and family, you know, relationships either. And also, she's been burned like pretty badly in her love life in the past, you learn, and a couple of times. And so she's, you know, she's not quick to give a part of herself to somebody else.
Absolutely.
You know, that's she's very guarded.
Yes, absolutely. More questions? Let me go over here.
The reasoning or inspiration? Well, I just wanted to write a story about humanity's first city that's not on Earth. And, you know, it's funny, it's like one of the big, I guess, inspirations for it was the movie Chinatown, which people say, what? But Chinatown and Artemis are both about basically the nasty stuff that happens under the hood in order for a city to grow. And that's what I wanted. I wanted Artemis the city itself is like one of the characters in the book, in a way. And so I wanted to tell that kind of story.
Did you have one? Okay, right here.
I'm Henry.
Hi.
Well, how did she survive?
How did Jazz survive?
I'll say yes, how did she survive, but I don't know. You have to read the book. Is that a good answer? Isn't she on a hard
I
side?
suppose so. I mean, how did she survive what? Like, how does she survive living on the moon? There's a whole city surrounding her.
Yeah. Oh yeah, how does she survive on the moon, he's asking. So maybe a little bit about the environment, a little bit more about the environment that she lives in?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, so Artemis, the city, inside those thick double hulls, it provides a you know, human comfortable atmosphere. They always keep it at room temperature. It's always about 22 degrees Celsius inside, which is like, you know, 72 degrees Fahrenheit or thereabouts. They manage the oxygen, the city. It's like municipal public works, the same as you get water from the city in your house. In Artemis, you get air from the city. It's provided. They filter the carbon dioxide out of the air. They provide new fresh oxygen for everyone. They keep the temperature reasonable. They have nuclear reactors to deal with power needs. It's a civilization.
They make oxygen, yeah. And then
they make oxygen.
Live in there, and then they shield it, and then they can get around. So it's pretty cool. What about, can you tell us about how they get food and goods and all that kind of stuff, and how they address issues of, I don't know, nutritional food and things that are going to get, they're not going to get scurvy and all that kind of stuff. What do they got going on?
Sure. Well, first off, they're not Earth independent. They definitely, like if Earth disappeared, Artemis would have serious problems. They import a lot of stuff, they import a lot of food, but shipping stuff between Earth and the moon is very expensive, even in this world where it's been made much cheaper. And so rich people on Artemis, or tourists usually as well, will eat food that's been imported from Earth. So you'll eat, you know, it's been frozen or freeze-dried or stuff like that because, you know, it takes too long to get there for it to be fresh, but it's still very good tasting food that you can get at nice restaurants. But if you live there and if you're poor, you have to eat, or you probably are going to eat this stuff called gunk. And gunk is locally grown. That's what makes it so much cheaper. It's just like extremely cheap. And all it is it's an algae called chlorella. And you can grow chlorella in vats of water, and it has a doubling time generation. In other words, like if you have half a vat full of chlorella today, then in 3 days you will have a full vat of chlorella. So it's one of the few things that you can grow fast enough in a tiny confined area like Artemis is to feed like a city full of people. Now, you take it out, it's just an algae, but it's actually a superfood. If you take chlorella out of the water, dry it out, it turns into kind of this greenish powder. It tastes awful. I've had some. It's awful. But you could add flavor in, you could add extracts to it and stuff like that to make it somewhat palatable. But the point is, it's got a really interesting property, this algae, in that, first off, it generates everything that a human being needs in terms of nutritional content. And second off, based on how much light and what frequencies of light it gets when it's growing, it turns either more of that energy into proteins or more of it into sugars. And that's all has to do with why, that all has to do with the algae survival. It says like, it turns it into sugars if basically it's not doing it for you, it's doing it for itself. But what's really cool is that you can control the amount of light and the frequencies of light it gets such that it generates perfectly nutritionally balanced content for human beings. And then you can eat that, you can live off of that indefinitely. Doesn't taste great, but it deals with all of your nutritional needs.
Yeah, it sounds better than the food in Snowpiercer.
Yeah.
You know, Snowpiercer. Okay. Any more? Is there any more questions? Coming right over.
Hi. You spoke about the experience of writing the female line, but I would think the greater challenge for me would be writing cross-culturally. And it's so easy to get little things wrong. I'm wondering if you could speak to the process you went through to write a cross-cultural character who was not from your own culture.
Yeah, that was actually much easier than you might suspect. A much bigger challenge. So Jazz is cross-cultural. Her backstory is that she was born in Saudi Arabia, and she lived there until she was 6. Then she and her father moved to Artemis, where she's been ever since. And she's 26 years old now. So it's also, her culture is not Saudi. Like, her culture is Artemisian. That's her hometown, is Artemis. So her culture is a culture that I made up. So I'm by definition right. And so that part was easy. So for Jazz, that was easy. She's just, she has the social norms and morals of a society that I invented. What was a much bigger challenge was dealing with the characters who did not grow up in Artemis. So the biggest challenge was Jazz's father, Ammar Bashara. He is, first off, a devout Muslim. He's also born and raised to adulthood in Saudi Arabia, and he's a practicing practitioner of Islam, and he's very devout. He's also very respected, a very honorable man. Everybody in town likes him. He's a really good guy. And so accurately and respectfully portraying a Muslim, that was the biggest challenge for me because I really didn't want to get it wrong. I didn't want to appear to be like, I don't know. It's a sensitive thing these days, and I didn't want to appear to be, presenting him in any sort of negative light. And I also didn't want to be inaccurate. So I did quite a lot of research on that, on the social norms of Saudis and Muslims, and I talked to Muslims about it. I talked to people who grew up in the Middle East. Actually, one of my best sources was this woman I know who is, where was she born? She was born in the Middle East, but I forget which country. Anyway, she was born in America, though. Her family, anyway, and she actually works for the U.S. Diplomatic Corps, and she has worked in embassies and U.S. missions and consulates all over the Middle East. And so she really had a lot of information about not just kind of Muslim culture, but also the differences between the individual countries and stuff. So she was a really good resource. But yes, in the end, it's something that I don't know firsthand. So I had to be really, really careful. And I've gotten no complaints about it at all, which is nice. I've got everybody's pretty happy with that. I've gotten lots of complaints on my portrayal of a woman, but no complaints about my portrayal of Islam or various other cultures.
So I don't think anybody's asked this, and we're starting to run short on. I want to ask this. You said your first 2 books, and I quote,
yes.
So your 3 and 4 are much better. Can you tell us about what you think changed in your process and what you would, there's writers in this audience of all different kinds. I've read some of their stuff. Can you tell them what's your process and kind of how you think that it is, why you progressed and how you progressed?
Well, there's no shortcut, it's just practice. You have to suck at whatever you're doing until you eventually suck a little bit less. That's all I did. I just kept writing and kept writing. And the stuff I wrote in the early days was awful. And then the stuff I wrote after that was awful. And then I just slowly got better at it.
So, I mean, like, for more specifically, I mean, is there, we had Walter Mosley here the last time, and he said 30 minutes every day, make sure you do your process, and then write more as you're going along, and just do that consistently. What is your kind of way of doing things?
Well, when I'm working on a first draft of something, I try to write 1,000 words a day. Or more accurately, I set myself a goal of 5,000 words a week. And that way, it's easier for me to continue motivating. But that's just something that works for me. You got to do whatever works for you. You've got to get yourself writing, though. You have to put words down on the page. If you're not writing, here's a couple of traps that you need to avoid if you want to be a writer. Number one, you have to actually write. You can't just daydream about what it'll be. You can't just like imagine everything and build out your world and stuff like that. That's all the fun part. The unfun part is actually writing. And it's when you're writing that you find all the problems. So you have to actually put words down on the page. Number two, you need to resist the urge to tell your story to your friends and family verbally. And that's hard. That's really hard because you have some cool idea, and if it's a really cool idea, they will actually be engaged and not just indulging you. They'll be like, oh, that's awesome, then what happens? The problem is, most writers, not all but most, are driven by a desire to have an audience. They want other people to experience the story that they've come up with. I certainly am driven by that, most authors are. When you tell your story verbally, it satisfies that need within you, and it saps your will to actually write it. So if you make yourself a rule that says like, oh, the only way anybody ever experiences my story is by reading it. So if I want someone to see my story, I have to write it down and hand it to them. And you don't have to write an entire book. You can hand it to your friends and family in like chapter or half chapter or sections or whatever to get the sweet, sweet validation that you crave. But once you do, but you make that a rule that you have to write it before they see it, and that'll help motivate you. And the final bit of advice I have for any would-be writers is this is the best time in history to take up the craft. Self-publishing and you know the internet has removed the old boy network that used to stand between you and the readers. Now there's nothing standing between you and the readers. You can write a book, you can post it up for sale, and get it into the hands of readers everywhere without spending a cent of your own money. And that's awesome. If it weren't for that, I wouldn't be here. I'd still be a computer programmer.
Right. Okay. I want to thank you, Andy, for being here. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for your writing. We're looking forward to more. So let's give him a hand. Thank you, Mr. Weir. Thanks, Andy.
What's that?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye. Okay, everybody, there